Greg Kerr. I'm 59, almost 60 years old. I live in Dublin, in Ireland. I grew up in Leitrim, which is rural Ireland, towards the northwest of the state. Yeah, as I said, I grew up in County Leitrim, a small rural town. Parents were dad had a small shoe shop, and worked several other jobs, I suppose, to make a few bob as well. Mom but would have been a homemaker, but also worked to keep the shop going as well. Um, Brothers and sisters, one brother and three sisters, pretty uneventful um, upbringing, really. I suppose there was an expectation of education, an expectation we would go to college, etc. So I then moved to Dublin when I was just about 17. Went to college, trying to become a primary school teacher, which I worked as a primary school teacher for 40 years, and I've just literally just retired from it just last month. I think I first got involved in radical politics or lefty politics of any sort when I was in college. I got involved in students' union stuff. There was some issues within the college. There wasn't really a students' union in the college, and a number of us got together and reinvigorated. It was a very small college I was in, Church of Ireland College of Education in Dublin. Small numbers got together and sort of reinvigorated the students' union over a couple of issues that were current in the college at the time. Nothing major. And through that, I suppose I got involved around in sort of the students' union nationally, the Union of Students in Ireland. And at that time, there was an ongoing dispute in Ireland at the time in Dunnes Stores, an anti-apartheid strike, where a number of shop workers, so probably it's a famous enough dispute right across the world. In fact, a number of shop workers had refused to handle South African produce and had been sacked by their employer, and got so it led to a big campaign around the whole issue of apartheid and South African apartheid, and eventually led, by the way, to the Irish government banning South African produce, and would have been very instrumental in sort of one of the things that I suppose eventually did lead to the dismantling of apartheid in South Africa as well. Parallels today with the situation in Gaza, etc., are very, very obvious. But that would have been very involved, not centrally by any means, but I suppose peripherally, and some of the support stuff around that. Would have attended the picket lines on many occasions, attended some of the protests. There were massive big protests around it. As well as through that, then started getting drawn into more stuff and just thinking about how things were organised and how society was organised, I suppose, and what obviously at the time growing up in Ireland as well, the North was a huge issue, the partition of the country, the ongoing what was referred to as the Troubles. There had been the civil rights movements. There had been people shot dead in Derry and Bloody Sunday, an ongoing issue around that really affected all radical politics in Ireland at the time. And one of the campaigns I became involved in as I got more involved in political stuff was an anti-extradition campaign where, in terms of, we would have at the time the Birmingham Six or the Guildford Four would have been falsely imprisoned in Britain for crimes they hadn't committed, just in the sort of anti-Irish hysteria that existed at the time. And there was big campaigns in support of them, and also big campaigns then around against the extradition of Republican political prisoners to Britain. Would have been involved a bit around that, and through that met people involved in the Republican movement, and so all of this would be conversations would have taken place and talk to people, and so all of that, I suppose, would have contributed to the development of my political thinking at the time as well. I'm talking now sort of late 1980s. Unemployment would have been a huge thing in Ireland at the time. Came out of college, and most people, when they come out of college or come out of school, there was very few jobs. Emigration was huge, and large numbers of people emigrating. So a small number of us in the area that I lived in Rathmines in Dublin at the time, and a small number of us got together and established an unemployed action group with the idea of and trying to campaign for better conditions for people who were having to sign on for unemployment benefit in the first place, and also around the whole issue of unemployment and jobs, etc., etc. There was also we got involved in some stuff around flat dwellers' rights. Again, a housing situation was really, really poor, still is, mind you. But some of the conditions in rented accommodation in that part of Dublin and in other parts of Dublin were very, very poor. So flat dwellers' rights group, unemployed action group, small number of us got involved in trying to do something, trying to organise some stuff around that. And through that, I would have met people like Andrew Flood, Dermot Shreen and Aileen Carroll, who were members of the Worker Solidarity Movement. I suppose when I got talking to them, they were, members of an anarchist organisation. I started talking to them and realized, oh shit, actually that's what I think as well, and without having, I never have been very good right down the years, still would be the same. And most of my politics has not come from books or from reading. Obviously I would have read bits of Kropotkin and Emma Goldman, Bakunin, etc. over the years. I've read lots of bits, but I'd have dipped in and out more so than my politics has always been formed by, I suppose, my experiences in campaigns and in stuff that I'm involved in. So I suppose when I had those conversations with Andrew and Aileen and Dermot and Anna Maximone and Kevin Doyle, who I got to know later, then I realised, oh yeah, there is a whole set of ideas out there that are sort of the same as the way I was thinking. And the way I was thinking was around the need for self-organization, the need for community activism, the need for people to take control of their own struggles, the need for people to look at and be given the confidence to be able to analyze what's wrong and come up with solutions. And all of the existing political parties that I had seen in action at the time were all sort of so authoritarian, so obviously sort of we know the answer. People come to public meetings not to listen, not to converse, not to have a conversation about, but to tell you how things should be done. I always hated that type of politics. This was when I just discovered, well, here's a whole brand of politics that operates in a different way. I was sort of amazed that, this exists. And so I joined the WSM at that time. That would have been late 1980s, probably early 1990s when I joined WSM. I was in it for about 20 years. I left it then. I left the WSM, the organisation, but I didn't leave the politics, I suppose. And sort of different reasons why that happened. I don't necessarily want to get into right now, but or to start the conversation at least. But yeah, the WSM being a platformist organisation and being organised in that way, again, looking at that and looking at the way of sort of, having that leadership of ideas, the idea that you have good ideas, but you don't try to impose them on people. You have to try and encourage people. You have to try and talk to people, to try and work with people. And you have to talk to people from where they're at as well, not from coming along from a perspective of, hey, we have all the answers, we're going to sort this issue out. That sort of from below, anti-authoritarian, and then build. And then the thing that I really liked about platformism and the platformist tradition of anarchism was the idea of theoretical and tactical unity. That idea that you work, you talk through, and you talk through theory. You try and agree on theory. You don't have to ram it down anyone's throat, but you try and agree on it. But then that you agree on, you sort of have a tactical unity as well. That when you get involved, you sort of say, well, the most important campaign that we should focus on for the moment is X, Y, or Z, and that we put our energies into that, and that everybody sort of goes down the same way, and that sort of collective responsibility, but building it on that federal basis as well, So I suppose it was involved then in WSM. Down through the years, we were involved in huge numbers of different local campaigns. There were various different community campaigns on water charges, bin taxes, which were essentially and it attempts to impose further taxes on working class people. So we would have been very centrally involved in what were massive campaigns. In the 1990s, there was a massive campaign against water charges, which was successful, a campaign that did have mass organisation, that it was a tax that was being attempted to be imposed on ordinary people, on everybody, to pay for your water, essentially. And the campaign was built around the concept of refusal to pay. and that when the bills would come out, people would not pay, and built around the concept then of defending people when they were taken to court for refusing to pay, and it built a massive campaign, and it took on the government and it defeated them, and it was one of the high points, I suppose, of sort of political activity that I was involved in, was to be centrally. I was actually ended up on the national committee, or as national secretary of the campaign, in fact. And what we did at that time and through those campaigns, I suppose, was we were able to bring anarchist politics directly into mass campaigns. So one of the things that I remember most vividly about that campaign, for example, would be a meeting at which, inevitably it was going to be proposed that, the way we'll defeat this is we'll get people elected in the elections, and they'll vote them out. And a huge, big debate at a national meeting of the campaign, several hundred people, at which we were in a position, because we had developed our credentials and been so much part of the campaign, to very articulately be able to argue the anarchist case against electoral participation and to be listened to, and for people to give that respect, and for people who were involved in other political organizations to be saying, yeah, well, I hear what the anarchists are saying, but I disagree with them, rather than the sort of the concept of most people's knowledge, or most people's supposed knowledge of anarchism, would have been, they're the mad guys that throw the bombs type of thing, So that to bring the whole concept of what anarchism was directly into the middle of those campaigns. Now, we lost that particular argument. The campaign did endorse candidates. Ultimately, the campaign won. And I think it was a huge missed opportunity in Ireland, because that campaign was hugely successful. But if you ask most people, now, so what happened was there was a by-election, and there was the person who was chairperson of the campaign at the time stood in the election, and he got elected. And he didn't actually get elected in the by-election, but he got elected in the general election that happened a number of months later, I think. But if you ask most people now to think back on that, how were the water charges defeated, they'll tell you, oh, well, they're defeated by Joe Higgins getting elected. Which the huge pity was if all of the left and everybody that had been involved in that had, instead of giving that message to people, had been able to tell people, hey, the reason why that campaign was elected was you got up, you put leaflets indoors, you went to protests, we collectively defeated the government on that. And I suppose that's where I would be coming from all of my life in terms of my political involvement, would be that we need to get people involved, first of all, I suppose, in fighting for their own issues, give them the courage, give them the skills, give them the support to tease things out, but also to talk up the victories when we have victories, and to let people see their collective power, rather than what authoritarian politics always inevitably does, is steps in, takes over, and claims that power for themselves. So I suppose that's one example. And right. And then I suppose over the years, I've been involved in various different campaigns on, different anti-austerity issues, trade union stuff. I was very involved in my own trade union, the Irish National Teachers Organisation. I actually ended up running for president as part of a campaign that we were running around an issue of pay equality. And again, the same sort of thing, the idea that an anarchist was running for election as president of a primary school teachers union wasn't laughed at by anybody. There was attempts obviously made to sort of paint, the mad anarchist sort of picture. But again, because of having been involved throughout the union at various different campaigns and having built that respect for the personal respect and the political respect, it was possible to get in and have those arguments and discussions around structures and how a union should organise. And again, that campaign was ultimately unsuccessful. And I suppose what it was most unsuccessful about was when I lost the election, people were saying to me, oh, are you going to run again next year? No, you missed the point. It was about us. The whole thing of the campaign had been about empowerment and the idea of, we were in the middle of a campaign around pay equality as part of austerity measures. The government had cut the pay of incoming teachers, protected the pay of those of us already in the profession, but had cut the pay of people coming in. And we were in the middle of a big battle around that. for the newly qualified teachers, and was part of that was to try and take on, the campaign for presidency. But again, that was the anarchist politics front and center in terms of being respected. We've also been very involved around campaigns around abortion rights, marriage equality, etc., etc. And I suppose that, to my mind, is what anarchism has to be. Has to be rooted in real campaigns that people are involved in. It can't be just producing papers and magazines, but they're very, very important. But those papers and magazines have to reflect where people are at, and also have to then link the struggles and try and bring those struggles together. So people that are involved in social, what you might call social issues, such as abortion issues, abortion rights, for example, trying to link that to support for strikes that are taking place or whatever, or vice versa as well, making all of those links. So I'm probably rambling a bit now, but just in terms of what would the main, I suppose, things that WSM would have been involved in down those years. We organised an annual anarchist book fair, which was massively successful, brought together like various different campaigns. And again, it wasn't predicated on, this is anarchism. Yes, this is anarchism, but it wasn't lectures about what anarchism is. It was an opportunity to bring together people involved in various different campaigns and having them listen to each other, having them talk to each other, having them learn from each other, having them make connections with each other. And we tried to use the anarchist book fair to do that. We tried to use also our regular paper, Worker Solidarity, and we had a theoretical magazine, Red and Black Revolution, and later Ideas in Action. And again, the idea was bringing together, obviously the magazine was more theoretical, more heavy stuff, if you like, but the paper would have been very much reports on ongoing struggles, and so that someone that's involved in the Water Charges campaign might read about a strike or might read about the abortion rights stuff or whatever it might be. That sort of answers that question, I think, does it? Basically, I suppose, to try and put it in a nutshell, it's participatory democracy. It's building a society from below. It's looking at building a society in which everybody is equal, in which we're able to respect each other, respect differences, and provide space for those differences, where we can build a society that is built for people and not for profit or exploitation. And that, a comrade put it very well at one stage: now your freedom to swing a pan ends wherever my nose starts. The idea that there will of course be limits on our freedom, but they have to be based on building from below and based on equality and based on the idea and the concept that we are all in it together, and we need a society which is for us. And I think in the current situation, climate-wise, for example, when people see how the climate crisis, when people see the massive transfer of wealth that's going into a smaller and smaller number of hands, people are gasping out for a new way of doing things, and people are looking for a new way. So I think there's huge opportunities for us there to espouse those ideas, and it is really about looking at people's ability to organize themselves. And I often use, people sort of say around, if you look in any community, every community around is based on volunteerism. People are out training football teams. People are out doing tidy towns work. People are out doing so much stuff. And why did they do that? They don't do it for monetary gain. They do it because they want to contribute to making the world a better place. And that is trying to take that concept that people genuinely have inherently, but it's sort of beaten out of us, and build on that, and build on that concept that we need to build society that is for all of us and not just for the privileged few. I suppose the first thing I would say is that the reason why the far right is managing to gain its foothold in working class communities is a massive failure of the left. It's our failure collectively to be able to espouse ideas that appeal to people. The only solution to it is to be involved in local struggles, to get involved and to start to build and show that there's an alternative to what the far right are trying to. They're coming up with their easy answers are, it's blame the immigrants. Their easy answers to the fact, I mean, it's a huge issue in Dublin at the moment. There's a housing crisis. The easy answer is to blame immigrants instead of blaming landlord class, blaming the vulture funds that are coming in and that are bringing people's money off and that are hoarding property rather than making it available to rent. So what we try to do locally is that we need to build campaigns around housing rights. We need to build campaigns that are challenging those easy answers that the far right are using, but that are also talking to people. And we need to be able to talk to people. And to some extent, sometimes some of the libertarian left and the anarchist left perhaps doesn't manage to do that. Perhaps sometimes we end up talking to ourselves in our own meetings and in our own circles. And perhaps sometimes also we're too quick to police what people say. And I don't mean that we should not challenge racist ideas, but is the way in which they're challenged. There's a tendency sometimes that the way in which they're challenged will drive people back into the arms of the far right rather than draw them back towards us. We need to be able to talk to people, have conversations, and draw them back into that concept of, a better society that's for everybody. And one of the ways that the state has been really great at fomenting this division, of course, is to keep people separate from each other. So that they try to ensure, for example, that asylum seekers, people in the international protection system, don't get the opportunity to mix with people, don't get the opportunity to make friendships. Because it's if you look at it, if the people that are being threatened with deportation are the kids in your local school or the kids that are on your kids' football team, that's a whole lot different for you than if the people that are being threatened with deportation are some faceless people that you don't know. So another important thing that I think it's important for us to do is to do everything we can to break down those barriers and to build links between people. And again, that concept of sort of people seeing their one struggle and seeing the common link, I suppose, with other struggles. Trade union movement is the place where that should be happening. Unfortunately, here, and I think throughout Europe, and I'm sure the same in the States, the trade union movement in recent years has become very, very blunted. The gap between where people are at as ordinary workers and ordinary members of the movement and the leadership is huge. We had, right throughout the 90s, and into 2000s in Ireland, we had a thing called social partnership, which basically brought the trade unions and the government together to sort of, to screw us all over, essentially. But it means that people no longer see, trade unions no longer see themselves as organising people. They're more about providing a service. They're the service model rather than the organising model. So it's much more difficult to do that work, but it's really, really, it's what's necessary is that work that's involved, that basically brings people together, gets them to see what they have in common, and draws those links. If we don't do it, we're going to be screwed over, because basically the far right, as you said, are gaining a foothold. Have gained a foothold right across a lot of European countries. Certainly in the States, things are far from rosy at the moment. And the only way that can be defeated is by hard, painstaking work in communities at grassroots levels, at building campaigns that challenge them in a way that doesn't allow. So there's a huge gap there at the moment that the left has left quite wide open, and it's very easy for them to exploit it, and they have their easy answers of blame the immigrants or whatever. So I think the other aspect of it that I'd like to mention is that in terms of the left, I think quite often the left in the West fails to tackle some quite obvious stuff. The Ukraine, for example. I mean, the authoritarian left in Ireland, in Europe, is very, very poor on the issue of solidarity with Ukraine, with Ukrainian people. And most of the left still buys into the concept of, in order to oppose US imperialism, you can't really be too critical of Russian stuff. You have to, your main focus has to be on US imperialism. Yeah, US imperialism must be opposed and should be opposed. There's a big push at the moment in Ireland by government forces to sort of have us move towards joining NATO. And obviously there should be a huge campaign against us joining NATO. But none of the left in Ireland, or very little of the left in Ireland, is able to at the same time say, well, we stand in solidarity with the Ukrainian people opposing Russian imperialist invasion of their country. Unfortunately, the only place that Ukrainian people are going to get any weapons in order to resist that is going to be from NATO. And that's a sad reality. But should we, standing in our little safe place of the world, be saying, oh, no, you shouldn't be doing that. You must not be cozying up to NATO, because you should just roll over and accept that Russian imperialism can come in and squash you. That whole concept of being able to see two evils or more than two evils is very lacking sometimes, I think, with a lot of the left, and even some of the libertarian left. The Solidarity Collective stuff in Ukraine is something that people should really be looking at and seeing what they're doing and what they're looking for, and in terms of, and the parallels between that and obviously Gaza and Israel at the moment as well. In terms of, again, we had when you have a situation where when Israel was bombing Iran, some of the left basically saying, well, we shouldn't really be criticizing the Iranian government. Ask Iranian socialists, ask Iranian feminists whether we should be criticizing the Iranian government. Just because Israel is bombing them doesn't mean that suddenly they're the good guys. And I think a lot of the left sort of misses that ability to be quite pull all that apart essentially and have those discussions, because the left looks for easy answers. Yeah, well, I think the only way you can do it is to ask people to consider it from their own perspective. How would you feel? I ask people here, how do you feel if some imperialist force invaded Ireland? I mean, part of our country is still occupied by imperial. How would you feel if there were, Russian tanks were coming down Drumcondra, for example? What would you do? You'd obviously look to whoever is going to supply you weapons to fight back. Or would you roll over and accept it? So people everywhere are obviously have the right to fight back against imperialist aggression. And that's that the world is not easily broken into good guys versus bad guys. There's, in fact, more than 2 or 3 bad guys. There's no good guys at the moment. So there is no easy answer, but it can't be brushed away either. It can't be avoided. Again, you only get to have those conversations with people that already you have built respect with. So having those conversations from a sort of a lecturing, I know better than you perspective is a waste of time. Having those conversations with people that you're on a picket line with, whether it's on a Gaza protest, whether it's on a Ukraine picket, whether it's a strike support or whatever, having those conversations with people that you have built respect for, not just your personally respect, but respect for the politics that you come from, then you have much more opportunity to have the conversation. And I think what we need to avoid doing is just talking into our own little echo chambers where everybody will agree with us, and are avoiding difficult conversations because we don't want to have them either. So there's no easy answers. I think what I see as being necessary is the building of a movement, and it doesn't exist. It doesn't, anarchism as an idea exists, but there isn't an anarchist movement to any great extent. There are parts of an anarchist movement. I think there's fertile ground out there for the ideas. I'm sort of quite pessimistic at the moment, though, as to whether the seeds are landing on that fertile ground. And I do think that there's a tendency among some anarchists to remain within the anarchist bubble, if you want, for a better term, and to not be part of those ongoing community struggles. That's the only way we will build a new society, is we need to be stuck in. Now, having said that, I've been doing it for 40 years and I haven't got very far. So there's no easy sort of solution that you can pick your fingers and say, here's where it comes from. But I do think it's about supporting people, encouraging them, sharing skills, trying to create a space where people can gain confidence in their own ability to organize. And if people can gain confidence in their own ability to organize and in their own ability to question leaderships, and whether those leaderships are political leaders, trade union leaders, or whatever else, question truths, question what they're told, and give people those skills, I suppose, is what we can do. And in that way, we can hope that things will develop in a more positive way. But yeah, to supposed to answer your question, it really is by having those conversations with people that you have built trust with and built solidarity with is the only way around it, I think. I mean, I suppose actually, probably something I should say is that I went through all of that interview without actually using the word class at all, which is strange because at the end of the day, class struggle is at the heart, has to be at the heart of everything. So all of the campaigns, that's the thing, I suppose, that ties them together, is the concept of class and class society and building a new society that puts the working class at the heart of it. I wouldn't like to go through the whole thing without sort of saying that it's not just about the disparate campaigns that people are involved in. It's about how you link those together, and that linking those together has to put class struggle at the heart of it.